Hi guys, what's up? I hope you're doing great. In this video, we're building a Golang and MongoDB web server API. And the title of the video says CRUD, but this is not actually going to be CRUD, complete CRUD. We just have create, read, and delete. We don't have any update because this is a beginner-friendly video, and update function confuses the hell out of beginners, right? So if you're an advanced developer, there are many more videos on my channel. You can go and check them out. This specifically is a beginner-friendly video where I'm going to explain every single line of code, and I'm not going to go fast. I'm going to go slow. And this video also doesn't have any parts. This is going to be a single video, and I'm going to try and cover as much as possible, actually the whole thing in just one video. So we'll try and cover that. So now there are three things that I'm assuming. One is that you have completed your Golang tour, so you know what are struct methods, you know what are slices and pointers. If you don't know these topics, then it's going to get a little complicated for you. All right, but I'll try and explain in a way that even if you don't know those things, it'll still make a lot of sense to you. Anyways, now the second thing that I'm assuming is that you know how HTTP requests work, in the sense you know what is a GET request, you know what is a POST request, you know what is a delete request, right? And the third thing that I'm assuming is that you have MongoDB installed on your system. Now you could be using a fully managed MongoDB service like MLab or something like that, and you could have that MLab link that you could use here. But I would recommend that you have MongoDB installed on your system. The way, I mean, if you don't know how to do it, then there's a video on my channel that specifically works with Ubuntu and helps you to install MongoDB on your Ubuntu machine. And the installation that I have shown in my video is very, very simple, in the sense you don't have a specific user that only that user can talk to MongoDB, right? Any user on your system can talk to MongoDB, and it's an authentication-less service. It's a direct, connect with MongoDB, and the MongoDB service is always running on your port 27017. So that's the very basic, simple install that I show in my video, but that's only for Ubuntu. So if you're on Windows or Mac, then there are thousands of videos on the channel. But only thing you need to remember is that you have to go for the very basic MongoDB install, in the sense, no special password, no special users, like a very basic MongoDB install. Get that done on your machine and get it running on ideally the 27017, which is the ideal port for MongoDB, like the default port, right? So if you have that running and installed, then you can start with this video. And so I'm on my terminal in Ubuntu, but the commands that I'll type here will be the same for Mac and almost the same for Windows if you're using PowerShell, that is. So let's get started. So I'm in the folder where I usually keep my Golang code. So here I'm going to say mkdir, and Mongo Golang is the name of my project. And now whenever you start a new project in Golang, if you're new, this is very helpful to you. You have to write go mod init and the name of your project. So in my case, the name of my project has a GitHub link. So it says go github.com/Mongo Golang, right? And so this creates a go.mod file in your project. Sorry. So I think by mistake I've created the go mod file outside. Anyhow, so I had to Golang Mongo, cd Mongo Golang. So I had to be inside my project before initializing my project. So that's one mistake that I made. Not a problem. So you have to say go mod init, and so you'll say here github.com/Akhil and /Mongo Golang. And the go mod file that you have created by mistake in the outside folder here, I'll just go and delete it later on after I create this video. You can do that same as well. So all you need to look for is this go.mod file that it has created. So go mod init, if you're coming from a JavaScript background, then this is very similar to npm init. It just creates this file which will basically have a list of your dependencies. So basically this makes it very similar to your package.json file, right? And with Golang, a lot of packages you can use which come with Golang by default, and then there's some that don't come with Golang by default. So you have to call import some external libraries. So very similar to npm install, right? Importing external libraries. So we have to install those. So for the Golang equivalent of that is go get, and you have to right, the name of the package. So for Golang, you don't have like an npm registry, right? You have your npm repository where you have all the list of all the libraries. So with Golang, you don't have an equivalent of that. So all of the Golang packages, they reside on GitHub mostly. So that's why we say github.com and the name of the package. So in this case, we're going to be using Julian Schmidt / HTTP router. Now there are many packages or libraries with Golang that you can use to make requests, which are like Fiber and Gin and all of those. But here I'm just going to be using the standard HTTP router, which is a very simple, very widely used library. It's very easy to get started with, simple to understand. Since it's a beginner-friendly course, this is what you're going to use. So it has added this package to my project. And so now you can see there's one more file automatically created. It's called go.sum file. So this basically is like your package log.json file, if you're from JavaScript background, that is. And if you're not from JavaScript background, this is very simple in the sense this has your dependencies, and this has more details in the sense this will also have list down the dependencies that your dependency in your project is dependent on, right? So the list of all dependencies, this is what go.sum file will have. So it's like package.json, this is like package log.json, this is package.json, and this is like npm install, and this is like npm init, right? And if you're not from JavaScript background, these are the commands that you just need to remember and understand these things. You can't draw a parallel with JavaScript, not a problem. It's okay if Golang is your first language, right? That also works. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to explain every single line, so you don't have any issues. So the other package that we need, the external package that we need, is go.pkg.in/mgo.v2. Now this is your MGO package, which basically helps you to work with MongoDB. That's why you need it. This helps you, help create those functions to help your handle your HTTP routes. This helps you to connect with MongoDB. And there's one more thing that you can do, and that's there's in this library mongo.v2, there's a package called bson. So sometimes what happens is that when you install this right, go package.in/mongo-v2, when you install this library, you get this by default, and that's what has happened in our case. So that's why I didn't say go get. It didn't say that it's added bson to our project. But sometimes with some systems, I've seen that even when you have installed the mother package, which is this, and you try working with bson, which is a package inside this library, it gives you errors. So this is why I recommend that if you want, you can also as an additional step, you can also run this. So now that we're done installing all the external packages that we need, what we can do is we can open up our project in a code editor. So I'm using VS Code. You could be using anything else, not a problem, but VS Code is recommended. And here we'll have our file, our main.go file, and we'll have two folders. One will be the controllers, and the other will be models. All right. In our controllers, we'll have our user.go file, and our models, we'll again have our user.go file. So the way we're going to approach this project is in our main.go file, we'll basically have our routes, like let's say /user/id or /user and /user/id for delete. Those routes, we'll have those here. The functions that will help us to work with those routes will be in our controllers, and our models will be very simple. It'll just basically have a struct with how the user model is going to look like. So what we'll do is in the beginning, I think we'll first, or I think we'll just write the outline of our main.go file actually. All right. So in your main.go file, which is the main file in a Golang project, the first thing that you write is package main at the top, and then you write your import statement, where basically you're going to be importing all the packages that you need in your package main, and then you have your func main, which is your main function. So this is like the outline of your main.go file always, usually. And main.go is the entry point into your project, and specifically func main is the entry point function into your entire project. So this is how Golang works. All right, so let me just make sure if we're still recording, because I think we're still recording, I'm not sure. Yeah, we're recording. sometimes what happens is that you stop recording and you don't come to know. Anyhow, so here in the import, that we need two packages that we just imported, right? The external packages. So one is Julian Schmidt /HTTP router, and the other is gopackage.in/mgo.v2. So these two packages for sure we need, and then we need one more package, the net/HTTP package, which basically helps us create the server, the listen and serve function. So now, in case you don't know about this package, there's a video on my channel. It's called "Building a Simple Web Server with Golang in Under 20 Minutes." It's called something like that, right? And you can go check it out. It basically shows you how to build a web server using this package. It's quite simple. And now that we have the outline of this function, what we'll do is we'll go and create our models. So the package is going to be called models. So what we're doing here essentially is we are breaking down our code. We could have written everything in our main.go file, but we just have these different files here, user.go and our models folder and controllers folder. So yeah, one thing that I didn't tell you right now by now is that this is a user-friendly video, as in a beginner-friendly video. So we don't have validations, we don't have test files, we don't have all those advanced functionality right in this project. But I will be creating more MongoDB and Golang projects soon on this channel, which will have a lot of details, in the sense it'll have Redis for caching, it'll have test files, it'll have validations, a lot of different things it'll have. So and also the update function, which I'm not covering in this video, will have an update function as well. Update can be slightly challenging, by the way. So so don't worry. I mean, if you think if you're wondering where would you learn all the other things from, this is the channel. You'll get to learn everything from here, so do subscribe. So this package is going to be called models. So we are basically dividing our project into different packages, and then we'll import all those packages in our main.go file if required. Okay, and so the structure of any file, a new file in Golang is the same. You have your package, you write the name of the package, and you import something. And here we're just going to import gopackage.in/mgo.v2/bson. All right. And then you have, so a model basically is something that tells your Golang project or program how to the data structure of it, basically, right? So I'll explain to you, I'll show it to you, and then you'll understand better. So it's a struct. So if you have a basic idea of Golang, struct is basically your own data type. And here we're creating a data type called user, which is of type struct, and it has a few variables. It has an ID, it has a name. So a user will have an ID, a name, a gender, and an age. So this model here, which is user, a struct, right, is going to be like a glue or like a I can call it a glue layer between your database and your Golang program, right? And so as a programmer, you're going to be using these variables, ID, name, gender, age, inside user, but you have to define what type they are, right? So ID is going to be of type bson.objectID, because these IDs will be created automatically for every single user. Name, as you know, is of type string usually. Gender will be of type string, and age will be of type int. And now you have to tell Golang that in JSON it's going to look like this, right? But in BSON, which is the format that's understood by your MongoDB, it's going to look like this. So if you have any experience with MongoDB, you know that it stores IDs with an underscore. So it says underscore ID. And with JSON, what we'll send from our postman to make requests to Golang will be ID. But with Golang, when we're working inside the function, we'll be accessing ID. So there are three different things, right? This is what is going to come from our postman. This is what's going to go to our database. And with Golang is ID. Right? Three different things. I hope that makes sense. If you worked with Dart or any other Google programming language, right? So Dart is also another programming language that Google has made. You would know this, as in this is very standard, what I've seen with all the programming languages that Google has made. So here again, for name, the JSON will look like name, and the BSON will look like name. So with ID there was a difference, but with name there is no difference. And with gender also there won't be any difference, so we'll say JSON and it says gender here, and JSON it says gender again. With age again it's the same. Perfect. Now this is your model for a user. So any user in your project will have an ID, name, gender, age. Very straightforward, very simple. So so the user model, right? And in any project, like a big project, let's say if you're building a project management software or a CRM or an e-commerce, the user model usually is quite huge. It's the most central, and it bloats up very quickly. You have fields like created by and created at, updated at. So all of those different fields, we're not going to be working with those because, like I said, this is a beginner friendly video, but the other videos that will come up on our channel will have all of those standard implementations. Here we're keeping things very, very simple and straightforward. All right. So that's the thing with user model. Now what you'll do is you will head over to your main.go file, and here what you can do is we can so we'll take our HTTP router, okay, and we want to create a new instance of our HTTP router. So we'll say HTTP router.new, and this, by the way, is a function that's present in your HTTP router package. The new function, it basically creates a new instance, and the new instance we're going to assign it to our variable r. So this walrus operator helps you to basically you don't have to write var r and then var r is equal to all of that. So both of those things are covered in one single line with the walrus operator. And the other thing that you can do is you can sorry, one thing I forgot is if you don't do this, right, so you might be wondering why we are keeping this in this variable called r. If you didn't do this, you would have to write HTTP router dot new dot get, right, to handle all those functions, get, post, and delete. So here we can simply write r dot get and r dot post and r dot delete, all of these different methods. And here we can define our routes, and here we can define the function that will help us work with those routes. Does that make sense? Okay. And we need a new session as well. So here what we'll do is we'll pass something called UC, and UC is going to be a variable that basically helps us to get a session. So in our controllers, we'll soon define this function. So this function is going to be called new user controller. Don't worry about it right now. Don't worry about too much right now. We'll write this function inside our controllers file. That's why it's saying controllers.newUserController. And inside here we'll pass a function called getSession. So you'll soon understand why we're doing this. So getSession is going to be a function that we'll create here in our main.go file. So we'll say func getSession, right, and it's going to return a pointer to the MongoDB session. Now if you're from a JavaScript background, you're wondering what is this, what on earth is this, right? So this is basically the return type of the function. So with Golang or with Dart or any other Google programming language that I've seen that you have to mention the type of the variable or whatever parameter, whatever you're returning from this function. You have to mention that as well. And so inside these brackets is where the function will take the parameters, and here is what will be the return type of those parameters. So as you can see, this getSession function doesn't take any parameters. So here what we're doing is whatever is returned from getSession is going to be passed to this new user controller function, which will be in controllers. Okay, so we'll work on this. You'll understand it much better. And what this function, getSession function, does is it just takes your MGO package, your MongoDB package, and it uses a function called dial, and it calls your MongoDB. So in my case, MongoDB, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, is always permanently running on this port, localhost 27017. So when I say MongoDB dial, it's basically going to dial this, and it's going to get me a session. So to get the session, I'll just take it into this variable called s, and it might return an error as well. So I'll take that into a variable called err, and if there is an error, which means if error not equal to nil. Now, by the way, this is a very common way of handling errors in Java, in Golang, right? So whatever function you call, it either returns a value or it returns the function. And if there's an error, it returns a value or it returns an error. If there's an error, then you can do something like panic. You can panic and stop everything, or you can just log it out, or you can print it out onto the terminal, or you can send a bad request to the front end. Whatever you want, you can handle it here, right? And so you don't have any try-catch blocks like JavaScript here, but with every line, after every line, you can handle errors. So I find this to be a much better and much clearer way of handling errors than JavaScript, by the way. And return s. So if there's an error, it'll panic, or if there's no error, it'll just return the session. Now, this very small line, right, is what helps you to connect with MongoDB. So sometimes you just get amazed with how simple Golang is. It's just with one line. It's not even one line. It's just one word or one function. It helps you connect with MongoDB. Very simple. All right. And now, what we'll do is we'll mention the routes. So I'd mentioned that we don't have update here. We just have get, post, and delete. And with get, we just have get by ID, right? Get all is very straightforward, and anybody can do it. So that's why I want to show you get by ID, post, and delete with the help of ID, of course. So you have your user/ID, which will be your route, and the function that will handle this route is going to be uc.getUser, and this obviously is going to be inside the controllers. This function is going to be, we'll be writing that in the controllers, which will completely handle how MongoDB basically handles this, in the sense the controller will basically pass the ID to MongoDB and get the data for the user. And here with post we have /user, and here we'll say uc.create user, which again is a function that we'll write in the controller. And with delete we just have /user/id, and here we have uc.delete user. All right. And the last thing that we're going to do is we'll take the http.listen and serve. So just this function, listen serve, it creates the Golang server for you. And here you can mention the port on which you want the server to run. In my case, it's port 9000, but usually people use 8080 port for Golang servers. Since my port 8080 is always blocked by Java, so I use 9000. And you pass your HTTP router instance here, because this is what's going to handle all these routes for you, right? These three routes. That's why you have to pass R into your listen and serve function, which is running on port 9000. So we have our main file in order, and now all we need to do is, and we have our models file in order, and now all we need to do is start working on our controllers file. Controllers file, you'll have these three functions: get user, create user, delete user, and you'll also have your new user controller function. So let's head over to our controllers file, and here we'll have package controllers. Now, to be able to use this package controllers in your main file, you'll have to be able to import it, right? So that's one thing that we have not done. I mean, if you want to use controllers, you have to import controllers here. So the way we're going to do that is, if you remember, the name of the project is github.com/akhil/mongogolang, right? /akhil/mongogolang. So this is the name of the project. And if you want to import the controllers, all you do is you say /controllers. So this is like an absolute route. Now, if you work with Dart, it's it's the same basically, right? You have your absolute paths, and basically you get into the project and then you find controllers. So this is the project, and then you find controllers, and you've imported the entire controllers folder here. That's how you work basically, right? And with controllers, you're going to be requiring the models that we've created here. So we'll say import. So by now I'm sure you're familiar with the format. You have to write the name of the package, import, and then you start writing all the functions that you'll need here down here. So with import, I know that I'll be needing the fmt package because I want to print out some stuff. I'll be using the encoding /JSON package. This is required because Golang is not like JavaScript in the sense it doesn't by default understand JSON. So you need encoding in JSON. So whatever data you get from your post request from your postman needs to be encoded first. Right. So the other thing that you'll need is the external packages that we had installed. So we'll say github.com/Julian Schmidt/HTTP router, and we'll also install the MongoDB package. Now I'm not sure if it's supposed to be capital V or small v, but for now I'm keeping it small v, and when I'd written small v here when installing the package, it didn't give me any error. It installed the small v2, right? But somehow I remember it being a capital V. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But in case we run into any errors when we run this program, just remember that we need to change this. We need to change this and try. Maybe it's capital V. Who knows? So here we'll say go package.in/mgo.v2/bson, and then we need the net/http package, which we have also used in our main.go file. This basically is a very important package whenever you want to work with HTTP requests in Golang. All right, and now we need to create a function which is basically your new user controller function. And new user controller function takes in session. So get session function returns a session pointed to a session, right, which is basically S. That S is what's taken by new user controller, right? So remember that. And so when we create this function, new user controller function, that means we have to accept S, which is of type mgo.session. All right, let me go through it again if you've not understood. Get session function returns a pointer to MongoDB session, right, from the MGO package. And that's the session is coming because you call this function mgo dial, and then it dialed this MongoDB localhost 270.1.7.107 and came to S, and it's returning S, which is the session which comes here, right? S comes here, and then that goes into your new user controller function. So that's why this function takes this. But this function returns a pointer to user controller. Now user controller is actually a struct, so we'll say type user controller, which is a struct. And what does the struct have? It just has session again with a pointer to mongo.session. All right, so here it says return an address of user controller S. Sorry, there's curly braces S. So straightforward. And that's what's written here. This user controller thing that's written here is basically the UC, and the UC is basically what has your get user, create user, delete user functions. And why does it have it? Because we had to define this struct because we want to create our get user function and our create user function and our delete user function. Now these three functions won't be simple functions. These will actually be struct methods. So if you don't know what struct methods are, then there's a channel called Tech with Tim, and you can go check him out. He has covered this in detail, what is a struct method. And in your Go tour also you have struct methods. So it's very, very straightforward. If you didn't understand it still, you can let me know. I'll create a video about it. I haven't created a video about it because I felt that there's so many introduction to Golang videos, but there are no videos which actually help you build stuff with Golang, right? So that's why I create all these Golang MongoDB, Golang SQL, all of those videos. That's why I do all of this stuff. Anyhow, so so this function, like I said, is not going to be a function. It's going to be actually a method, which will be a struct method. So that's why we say here user controller, right? So user controller is a struct, and this is a struct method. And get user takes in a couple of things. It has your W, which is your http.response writer. It takes in your request, or a pointer to your request, http.request, and it takes in your parameters, http router.params. So your HTTP package is taking care of the params by default. All right, very similar to what Gorilla does. If you've seen the video on Golang Gorilla on my channel, you'll understand what this is basically. I think I've covered that in the Golang CRUD video that I have on my channel. So I cover Gorilla, which is another package just like HTTP router, and that's also very, very simple to use package. So here we'll take a variable called ID. So we'll say P, which is basically the parameters being passed with the help of HTTP router package. So P dot by name, and here we'll pass ID. And then there we have to put a simple check here. If bson dot is object ID hex. So is this ID hex? Basically, we have to check that. It's a very simple, straightforward, and very common check. So if it's not hex, then we have to say status not found, right? So this is basically 404 that we have to return from here. And so write header, basically whenever you you send a response to postman, right? So W, basically W is the response that we are sending back to our postman or our front end, whatever whoever is making the request to Golang. You can send a header with it. So the header basically has your error code or your status code, like 404, 200, those kind of things, right? So that's what this is doing here. And then we'll take a variable called OID, and we'll say bson dot object hex ID, and we'll take a variable called U. He'll be of type user. So models is this file, right? And it'll be of type user. That means it'll have all these different variables. And for now it's empty, so this struct is empty for now. So that's what you have taken in U. All right. Now what we'll do now is we'll say if actually what we'll do is we'll say uc dot session dot db. Now with MongoDB, if you don't have a database existing, it'll create a database for you. So we'll say the name of the database will be Mongo Golang .c. So .c is basically the collection. So the collection of users, database is Mongo Golang, and your uc.session, you already know where that session came from. So no doubts about that out here. .db, because it's a MongoDB session using the Mongo library, so you already have the DB function here, you already have the collection function, and you already have the standard MongoDB functions like find ID, which basically helps you find by ID, right? So if you have experience with Mongoose in Node.js, this is very similar to that, in the sense it's giving you some functions, and it takes these and it converts it into the regular MongoDB function. So it's almost like an ORM that they've given you. All right. I'm not sure if it's a complete ORM, but I'm sure that it is an ORM, but it's not a fully functional, like a huge ORM like Mongoose, right? Mongoose is huge. All right. So the one issue with sometimes with using Golang can be that you don't get an equivalent of Mongoose here. You don't get an equivalent of Lodash here. That's because you don't have such big open source projects. But the thing is, Golang is so simple that sometimes you don't even need those things. So that's why people use Golang. And most of the Golang developers like me were actually Node.js developers, some time back. So I've been a Node.js developer and a Rails developer, and till now Golang has been the best language I've used. So I've been working with Golang for the past 5 years now, and I've been teaching offline since 3 years. And on YouTube, I'm new. I'm just 3 months old on YouTube. Anyhow, so what we'll say is, if there's an error, so we'll try running this, right? We'll try finding the ID, but then there could be an error, right? So we'll say error, and if there is an error, right? And if error not equal to nil, we'll say w dot write header 404. If there's an error, then you say 404, right? And you return. You don't do anything. So which is the same as this. Status not found. Okay. And what we can do is now marshalling and unmarshalling basically helps you to work with JSON data. So what we'll do is we'll take u, and we'll take JSON.marshal it, and we'll take the value in uj, comma error, all right. And if there's an error here, again, so with every single line you basically handle errors, right? If there's an error again here, we'll print out fmt.println, we'll print out the error. Or otherwise, if everything worked out fine, if there were no issues, then we'll say w.header.set and content type, comma application slash JSON. Basically, you're telling Postman or whatever that we are going to be sending JSON data from here, and we'll say write header http.status OK, which is the same as 200, status 200, and we'll say f print f percentage s new line, comma uj. So you'll print out your so in Postman basically you will print out your data, all right, and the header will be basically 200. So that means everything went well, all right. So you found the data from the database, right, and then you got that in u, and then you unmarshaled that u to get the data in uj. Sorry, you marshaled that data to get that in uj, and that uj basically you sent to the front end as JSON. So if you don't know what's marshalling and unmarshalling, it's basically converting to JSON and converting away from JSON into something that you need, right? So that's basically marshalling and unmarshalling. You'll find thousands of videos on this on YouTube, so you don't have to worry about it. And basically, if you've not understood this, let me take you through this function again. Okay, so get user is a struct method, right? And it takes these three things. So you get ID basically, because ID is something that we'll send in our params. So with the help of HTTP router package, you can access the params, and you get those params in your variable called ID. Now here you check if that ID is hex. If not, then you give 404. Otherwise, if everything is okay, then you take that ID in this variable called OID. And OID is something that you'll use with your MongoDB to find that data. You'll find that data with that ID. And at the same time, you have created this variable called u, which is a struct of type models.user, in which the value that you're finding from the database will come and stay. That's why you've sent the address here. And since you have that data that you found in the database for that ID in u, you're going to be marshalling it right into JSON and taking that in a value called uj. If there's an error, you'll print out the error. Otherwise, if everything went okay, you'll set a header for JSON and you'll write the header with 202 and you will print out this value. Right, and this value is what we'll see printed in our Postman. So that was your get user function. And now we have to create our create user function, and then we have to create our delete user function. So let's start working with our create user function. All right. Now in our create user function, again, this is not a function, this is a method. A method, a struct method more specifically. So we'll say func and uc user controller. And our create user method also takes w, it takes r, and since we don't want to be using parameters here, we'll use a blank character here. So we'll use blank for http router.params because we won't be using the params. We'll be using the request actually. So we'll say star http dot request, and we'll say w, which is http dot response writer. The response is what we'll be returning from this function. Okay, and here the procedure is going to be very same. So we'll take a variable called u. It's going to be type of models user. Basically, it's going to be this user, right? Struct user, and it's going to be empty for now. So that's what is u. And what we'll do is we'll use the JSON, the encoding/JSON package, this one, to use JSON dot new decoder to decode the JSON values that we'll get from Postman, so that Golang can work with it. And R is basically the request, and with the help of the request we can access the body, and in the body we'll pass the data, and the data that is getting sent from our Postman will be caught into u, right? That's why we have ampersand u. Now u dot id. So you have u, but you want to create an id for u, which will be self automatically created. So we'll use the bson package from mongo.bson, and we'll create a new object id for it, right? So let me just make sure we're still recording. Yeah, we're still recording. All right, so we'll create a new object id for the id, and then we'll use our uc.session.db, very similar to this, uc.session.db. all right, and the db is called Mongo Golang DB, and .c is the collection. In the users collection you want to insert something, which is you. Now in the previous one of the previous videos where we had worked with MongoDB, many people had asked me if how do I create this database Mongo Golang. Well, by the way, with MongoDB, if you don't have a database existing in your database, it will create it automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. And so you've inserted u into your database, so all well. But now whatever you've inserted, you want to send that back as a JSON object to your Postman, right? To tell the user that, hey, this entry has been created in the database. How do you do that? It's very simple. Use JSON.marshal. You take u, whatever was inserted in the database, right? And you'll say uj equal to this, and you'll also say comma error. So there could be an error here, and here will be a walrus operator, obviously. And if there is an error, which means error not equal to nil, you'll say fmt.println and error. All right, and if all went well, you know what to do, right? You create this header. So I can simply copy and paste it from here, but I won't do that. I'll actually write it out on my own again, so that if you're new to Golang, you type it out with me and you get more used to the syntax the more you type. So we'll say set and content type. By the way, for content type, C and T are capital, and comma application/JSON, and w.write header, and we'll use another HTTP request called status created, which is basically 201. So this is 200, this is 201, and we'll say fmt.fprintf. Same thing, we'll pass w, %s, and new line, comma uj. So not only are you creating the data in the database, but you're also sending it back to the user in Postman, saying that, hey, I've created, this is the data that I've created in the database. That's why you have all this JSON marshalling. So I'm sure you understood this function. Since this is a beginner friendly function, friendly video, I'll go through this again actually, and you can skip to the delete function, but I'll go through this again for the beginners. What's happening here is this is a function, but this is actually a method, a struct method for user controller. You have a create user function. It takes w, which is basically a response that you'll send back from this function. You take your request, which is a pointer to the request that the user has sent from their Postman to this to Golang, right? And then for the params, since it's a post method, we don't need any params, so that's why we'll have a blank character here. We'll take a variable called u. Using the walrus operator, we're going to assign it models.user, which is a struct that we have created on our own, which is basically this user. It's going to have these 4 different variables. So that's u here, and we're going to now decode it. So we're going to decode r.body that we get from our request to the user, to the program, and we'll decode it because this was in JSON, but we don't want it to be in JSON, and we'll decode it using our model struct, and so we'll get the data in the function in the format that we can use it in. And to create the ID for that, what we'll do is we'll create u.id, and we'll say bson.newObjectID. He'll create a new random object ID for it. Then we'll take our session.db, so with the help of our MongoDB package, and the database is called MongoGolang, the collection is called users, and we're going to insert this u there, the whole user there. Now that we've inserted it, let me just drink some water. Now that we inserted it, we're going to marshal it because we want to send it back to the user. So earlier we had decoded it from JSON into a format understood by Golang. Then from that we'll again convert it into JSON. So we'll say json.marshal. Marshalling and unmarshalling is very easy. You can watch any video on Golang about it, on YouTube about it. And so we'll marshal it into JSON. We'll take that value in uj, and it can also return an error. If it returns an error, we'll print out the error. But if it returns uj, we'll just send that to the front end, to the Postman or whatever. So very, very straightforward. So now we are only left with one function, delete user. Func uc user controller, and this is going to have 3 things, like I said: w HTTP router, comma r, which is percentage http.request, and p, which will be http router dot params. So here we need params because we need the ID, right? Because we need the ID to delete that particular data with that ID from the database. That's why we need the params here. And w and r you need always, because you'll have a request and response always to an API. So here we'll do something very similar that we did with the get by id function, which is this id is equal to p dot by name id. So we'll say our id variable, which would be p dot by name, and we'll use this id. And again we'll check the same thing. So I can copy and paste, but I'm not going to do that. I'll actually type it out because this is a beginner friendly video, like I said. So you need to get I want you to code along with me, and I want you to get used to this. Dot write header, and we'll say 404, and then we'll say return, and then we'll say oid is equal to bson dot object id hex id. All right, and here now it's very straightforward. We'll just say uc dot session dot db, and the db name is Golang dot collection name is users, and the function that the Mongo library gives us is remove id, which will be converted by this MGO library into delete by id, which is basically the MongoDB function. And oid is the id that we'll pass to it, right? And here we'll say if error and error is not equal to nil, then we'll say write header 404. Okay, so if we didn't find it from the database, obviously we're going to say 404 not found. But if everything was all right, then we'll say w dot write header and http dot status okay, which is 200 basically, and we'll say fmt dot f print w comma deleted user comma oid comma /n. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through our program now properly, so that we know that there are no issues anywhere. This looks to be all right, and the new user function looks okay. Get user function looks okay. Everything looks okay to me, but I'm pretty sure there will be errors here somewhere, and we'll have to try and fix those errors together basically. So you can also take a couple of minutes and go through the entire code yourself, so that if you can find any issues, you can try and fix them. In the sense, what I mean by issues are typos or any small silly mistakes. If you didn't put an inverted comma somewhere, if you didn't put this exclamation mark somewhere, just go and check for those kind of issues. And no matter how much you check, there will always be errors, right? We'll always find errors, so it's not a problem. The most important thing is to be completely fine with errors. And I don't think I'm missing any star or ampersand or any brackets. Everything looks all right. And what we can do now is we can actually go ahead and try and run our program. So fingers crossed, right? So we'll say go run main.go. So there are these hundreds of errors, and now we'll have to go and start fixing all of these errors together. So let's go one by one actually. 27.9 undefined bson object 27. Okay, 27 line 27. Okay, so with 27 sets object hex id, and this actually should have been object id hex, object id hex and id. So that error should now go away. And then we have undefined models 29.7 undefined models. That's because we have not imported models here. So what we'll do is we'll import models github.com/akhil/mongo golang/models, which is this, basically our own models package. Just like we had installed controllers, we had to import models as well. So now models are there, and this error should go, and so should this error on line 49, right? So 31 uc.session undefined, 31 uc.session undefined. Why does it say that? Okay, get user function. Yeah, so the one possible reason could be that this should have been a small s and not capital S. So this error should also be fixed. Alright, and then you have on line 42, which is now 43 because we press enter above there. So status OK, so that means K also should have been capital here with status OK, so that should work. And we have another issue with status OK out here in line 84. So line 84, status OK. Here also K should have been capital. So now these two errors will go away, and these undefined models and undefined status OK models should go away. And line number 69, which is this right now. Yeah, so here it says HTTP router has been used wrongly, so that's because we should have written HTTP.response writer out here. So let's fix that, HTTP.response router. Perfect. And line number 74, which is now 75, w.write header. So now it shouldn't give us an error, I hope, because we have fixed the response writer now. And now if we'll run this program again, we might get a few more errors, but it's totally all right. Oh, no errors, it's actually working. So your main.go file is working. So now let's switch on our postman. So my postman will take a while to load. Okay, no, there is some error. It says no reachable servers, panic. So that means it's not able to reach your MongoDB. So let's fix that first before we jump onto our. So for this error where it says it's not able to find MongoDB in our main.go file, that means there's an issue here somewhere, right? It's panicking, not able to find this server. I think the issue is here, where there should be space between import and the bracket. Now the color of import has changed, so now it's able to import this package and everything will work fine. Now let's try running it. Let's see what happens. Now we'll wait for a while, because after waiting a while it gives you this panic, right? It says no reachable servers. I think everything should be fine now actually. So let's head over to our postman. In our postman, I've already created my collection, so I'm calling the collection Go Mongo CRUD. And this, I've created 3 requests: create user request, get by ID request, and delete user request. In create user request, all you have to do is select post here from the methods and write HTTP localhost 9000/user. This is what you have to write. And the body, you can write anything. Name can be, let's say, Alex or something like that, and male, and age is 25. And if you send it, wow, the program is working. It creates an automatic ID for you, and name, gender, age. It has been accepted into the database. So to make sure that it's coming from database, we'll go over to our get by ID and change our ID here, and let's see what happens. Okay, so it was able to fetch it from our ID as well, right? And we can create more such users. We can say Lena or Alan. It's giving us a different ID every single time. And if you take this ID and you take it to get by ID, you'll be able to get the user Alan. So if I want to delete this user Alan, I'll go here and I'll delete the user. sent. Okay, so it says deleted this object. Now if I try and get by ID, it returns empty. That means this user is not there. So we've been able to create user, get by ID, delete user, all of these different things we've been able to do, right, with our program. And I hope you've understood the program properly and completely. And if you still have any issues, you can let me know. This is a very, very simple, very small, straightforward, easy to understand kind of a program, and I've tried to explain every single line. So I'm sure you have understood everything. And by the way, I sometimes help out people in the sense I mentor people online. It's not a paid mentorship because I don't have time to actually teach people online. I have my own software company that I have to run by the day. But sometimes on the weekend, if people are stuck somewhere, I do help them out on like a 30-minute or 40-minute call, just a free call, just to help you get out from the issues that you're facing. So if you want to get mentored for MongoDB or for Golang, for Node.js or for Flutter, these are my specialties. You can hit me up and I can help you out if you're stuck somewhere. And just a way to give back to the community, And thanks a lot for watching this video, and let's stay connected. You can subscribe to my channel so that you come to know when more such videos come out. And like I told in the beginning of the video, that I'll be creating more MongoDB and Golang videos with MongoDB and Golang together, but we'll cover more advanced stuff, like probably we'll build e-commerce website and all of this stuff. So thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next episode.